Fool me 6 weeks in a row.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the oil prices now. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Just happened. Last couple hours. Yeah. So last stages of a peace agreement. Maybe.
What do you make of this drop in oil prices? What's your analysis?
Without having any concrete evidence or concrete information about what's actually being discussed and by whom, we still don't know who they're dealing with. It could be one of those that this one could stick. At least that's the market's knee-jerk reaction, because we've gotten used to the idea that, every time oil prices creep a little bit higher, there's an announcement or a Truth Social from Trump that says, "Oh, we're working on something. There's a ceasefire. We're moving forward in our agreements." And oil prices drop, and then they just reload and go back higher again, and the next statement comes out. But the reaction this time was a little bit sharper than they have been before, because maybe there is something more to it. I mean, we have seen more tankers cross through the Strait of Hormuz lately than we have seen in the last 2 months. So, I mean, it is very possible that this thing could be winding down.
I think so. Yeah, I was just speaking. Go ahead.
I was going to say the real question is who Trump is dealing with, and whether or not the person or the people on the other side really have the ability and authority to make a decision and an agreement on Iran's behalf, one that would be acceptable to all the parties in Iran. Because I think that's the part that you really have to keep in mind. There's definitely various factions, and they're all competing for top spot at the table. They all have their own agendas. I mean, the IRGC has its own view of how this is going to go. We need to punish the Americans, and whoever Trump is negotiating with, can he force them to get the IRGC to be on board? I mean, there's a ton of questions here.
Man, I'm trying to message people behind the scenes to get more information on this. Yeah, I was just talking to someone, an official here in the UAE, a former official in the UAE. We did an interview, so pre-recorded. And I don't know what's going to happen, because he made something very clear. He said, "Mario, I don't think the Gulf will accept an Iran that controls the Strait of Hormuz. So unless Iran finds a way to share that control with the Gulf through Oman, or a deal with Trump includes the Strait of Hormuz, or I'm missing something." Because if the Gulf are not going to accept a closed Strait of Hormuz, is Trump going to walk away and let him deal with it?
No. See, I think that's the thing, that you underestimate Trump's resolve here, or people might have underestimated Trump's resolve. He has shown very clearly he's not afraid to walk away if he doesn't get what he wants. And if that's part of the deal, that one might be even more difficult than the nuclear program, right? I mean, the Iranians have shown some willingness to give up on the nuclear side, but Hormuz is their leverage. That's what they've got. If the regime wants to stay in power, they have to maintain Hormuz. That's going to be a real tough one. And you can see where other people's, especially UAE and Kuwait, Qatar, you can see where they're coming from, because they don't want to be held hostage for something like this down the road either, because this is, potentially catastrophic if it goes on even further. Which then brings up the question: is what Trump just put out, or the White House just put out recently, that they're in the last stages of putting together an agreement? Is that really true, or is this just the latest posture to try to talk oil back down lower?
He's talking a lot about Cuba, statement after statement. I haven't gone through the news in the last hour, so I'm reading it now as we speak. He's speaking at an event. So let me see what he says. Anything here that might give us a bit more context what's happening.
Well, didn't they just charge Castro with crimes for the 1996? I mean, that's what they did to Maduro before they went and got him.
Oh shit.
I don't have any doubt that Trump would love to wrap up Iran and pivot right to Cuba. Because, I mean, first of all, you're not going to have a massive oil price and energy shock if something takes place with Cuba. Probably wouldn't be fun, but nowhere near as globally dangerous as, a conflict with Iran. So I'm sure that the administration is definitely itching to move on to Cuba, because that would be a huge win if they could get that to take place. Although I think that'll be even more complicated than some of the scenarios.
Why is Cuba so important?
Well, it's right next door. I mean, it's 100 miles from where I live. It's in the age of drone warfare and asymmetry over distance. That's a danger you don't really necessarily want to have from a national security perspective. But I do think it's this, what we talked about the last couple of times that you and I talked is the This is about, bigger picture China Cold War 2.0. It's about making the mark on the Western Hemisphere, making sure the Western Hemisphere is as closely aligned to the United States as is possible. Eliminating Venezuela, taking care of the Panama Canal, securing that, and a whole bunch of other objectives that we probably don't even know about that are similar, lower level type of stuff than just strictly regime changes.
Let me read out the statement here. Let me read out some of the highlights of what we've seen now in the updates, and maybe that gives us an idea why oil prices are plunging. All right, so let's read the one on the Axios, again, always through Axios. According to Trump and Netanyahu's call. According to Axios, Trump and Netanyahu held a lengthy and reportedly difficult phone call yesterday, during which the two leaders disagreed on the way forward with Iran. Trump informed Netanyahu that mediators were looking on a letter of intent for both the US and Iran to sign, formally ending the war and launching a 30-day negotiating period covering Iran's nuclear program and the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. Boom.
Yeah.
One source described Netanyahu as having his hair on fire after the call, with Israel's ambassador to Washington reportedly informing US lawmakers of Netanyahu's concern, though the embassy denied this characterization. Netanyahu is also said to be planning a visit to Washington in the coming weeks for a face-to-face meeting with Trump. Yeah, so it seems that Trump decided to just walk away, man. Just leave things as they are for Netanyahu and the rest of the world to clear.
Well, we've seen this before too. I mean, look, these guys are masters at disguise. They did something similar to this. Remember last summer before the bombing of Iran, there was supposedly some dramatic disagreement between Israel and the United States just before the strikes were launched, and it was another one of those misdirections. That's why I'm kind of skeptical. I mean, look, from a national security or military perspective, the amount of disinformation that the U.S. has been able to put out there has been helpful to their cause. But it makes it much more difficult for you and I and other people who are trying to analyze the situation. What the hell are we supposed to believe here? That's why I'm really glad I'm not an oil trader. Can you imagine, trying to be long in oil and then Trump says something, you have no idea if it's true, if it's another more posturing. It's beyond the fog of war at this point.
There's another report here by Israel Hayam. A heated White House debate broke out between a senior U.S. official over the Iran policy. Vance and envoys Steve Witkoff and Kushner pushed for a preliminary agreement to end the war, while Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and Secretary of State Marco Rubio demanded pressure and a strike. Wow, okay, there's disagreement within the U.S. Trump ultimately decided to give, that's according to Israeli media, it could be all bullshit. Trump ultimately decided to give another chance to negotiations, despite criticizing Vance for allowing Iran to stall. Netanyahu and the UAE president supported a tough line, while Saudi and Qatar prefer avoiding escalation. Yeah,
there's so many competing interests here. It's got to be difficult. But if there is going to be a disagreement between the U.S. and Iran, or U.S. and Israel, something like that, something serious like that, it would have to be about leaving the Iranian regime in place, wouldn't it? Because that's, I think, Israel's goal here is complete regime change, or as they said, regime collapse in Iran. And the U.S. might be thinking, well, if we get the nuclear program, and like you said, Mario, and I have no reason to doubt your sources here, if we get the Hormuz situation settled out and hammered down for an extended period of time, would the U.S. walk away with the current Iranian regime still in place? I think the U.S. might. And the Israel would probably say that, no, hell with that. We didn't do this just for the Strait of Hormuz, or that could potentially be a big point of contention between the U.S. and Israel if it is real.
Just to be clear, my sources didn't say the Strait of Hormuz is sorted. They said the Gulf, according to him, and it's not like inside information. He believes the Gulf won't accept a Strait of Hormuz that will be left open. That will be closed, but that will be controlled by Iran. He said, like, this is a big red line for us. So Trump will be pissing off many, but I don't know how you'd reopen it. Like, I'm like, what's the solution then?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's so many sticky points here. That's why I'm pretty skeptical of what's that the idea that there's what did Trump say? Their last stretch of hammering out agreement. I tend to be skeptical of that because the complications here. I still go back to the initial thought that I've had from the very beginning. This is overly complex, and it's not so easy. It's just have some negotiations. It's not a real estate deal where Trump's going to come in, swoop in at the last minute, and negotiate the final thing and just sign on the dotted line. Everybody goes home happy. I mean, how would you settle the idea of the control of Hormuz for more than just the next couple of months? If that's what the Gulf states want, and again, you can see where they're coming from, how would you even approach that in some way that would be believable and credible? It would not be easy. And it's not something you're going to do during the, a period where everybody's threatening each other with, annihilation. What did Iran just say? The Iranian military just came out today and said, look, if the U.S. strikes us again, we're going after everybody else in the Gulf. This is going to spread region wide. So you've got threats going back
beyond the Gulf. Beyond the Gulf, they said they're going to go. It's going to become international because they've already done the Gulf. They're going to go global now. Which,
I mean, that's a credible threat. It's not just posturing. So you've got them threatening each other at the same time they're supposedly negotiating. That's why I'm skeptical. I'm going to probably be skeptical until the final announcement is verified by enough people that it's actually legitimate.
What would the price of oil need to go to for you to be like, all right, whoever has more information than we do believes the war is over? What would be a price that kind of confirms that the markets, because the market could be easily manipulated one way or another. But there's a level, like if oil goes to $60, I'm making up a number, then obviously someone with a shit ton of money or some hedge fund managers have information we don't yet have. They have, they have people in the administration that gives them information. Or if we see oil suddenly spike up tomorrow to $200, then there's a nuclear strike happening or something going on.
Yeah.
What's the price of oil that you'd be like, all right, that looks like it's at least investors that have information really believe it's over?
It's, again, we have to talk about different prices of oil, but just, generically speaking, the WTI futures curve or Brent prices, which are relatively similar enough. We've seen oil drop down into the low 80s on very brief occasions a couple of times. That was back in April. So something around $80 would be a signal that things are getting serious. And if it goes below 80 into the 70s, which we have not seen since the conflict started, that would probably be a signal that there's probably that the tipping point has been reached and the market is starting to capitulate on that side of it. Again, everybody's got to keep in mind here, the fundamental value of oil is 50, not 150. That's where oil was heading to last December before we started this Iran conflict and the geopolitical premium that's put into the price of oil. So if oil goes down into the 70s, that's probably a pretty good signal that the market is giving up on the conflict, reasonably assured that oil production and flow is going to be restored over a period of several months, but at least there's a pathway to do so. And on the other side of things, if you start to see cash prices and front contract spreads really blow out again to where there's a real desperate scramble to secure oil in the short run. I mean, at one point we saw, cash to future spreads up to around $30. I mean, historic highs. If you see something like that return, the market's kind of normalized here in May, not completely, but normalized enough, at least, where it was at some of the extremes. So if you see those spreads start to blow out again, that would suggest that the market is getting more and more uncomfortable, that the conflict is not just going to continue. It's more likely to escalate. So, oil right now is, in the range between 90 and 110. That seems to be the status quo. And then on either side of that, you kind of start to evaluate some potential changes.
So 90 to 110 means like, let's hold our horses. There's nothing too significant. It's the same shit, different day type thing.
Yeah, and that's kind of where we are now. I mean, the oil dropped from 105 and front month was 108 a couple days ago, so back down to 95. It's still within the range. It's a significant move, but I think it's overall kind of the same thing as I'm saying here. Yeah, the latest news might sound positive, but we got to take it skeptically because we don't really know what's going on.
What do you make of the meetings between Trump and Xi, but also more importantly, Xi and Putin and the statements that came out today?
Yeah, that was interesting because wasn't it the Russian position? They kind of wanted to downplay the meeting, and then Xi pulled out the all the stops, the red carpet. It was basically the same introduction that Trump got, which I think was
with the same girls, with the girls jumping up and down.
It was almost identical. In fact, it was scary how identical it was. Which was Xi sending a message, which was, "Oh, that meeting I had with Trump last week, that was no big deal. We do this all the time. Look, I'm rolling out the red carpet for the Russians." So I think the Chinese were trying to pull a power move there. And I still believe the biggest takeaway from the Trump-Xi summit was that there was no takeaway. It's almost like the thing never happened. They got together and look, this was a high-level meeting. It wasn't just Trump. You had Secretary of Treasury was there, Rubio was there, Hegseth was there, high-level officials. They made this a big deal, and nothing came out of it. I mean, some throwaway stuff that they gave the media, which suggests that this was more about posturing than not, or, conversations within these small various groups, sizing each other up and kind of framing the terms for moving forward here. And the Chinese are trying to downplay it by saying, look, we have this all the time. We just did the same thing for President Putin. I think that was probably the most important or most interesting takeaways, how China is responding to it.
But I keep looking down because the news is just flowing.
Yeah,
the groups are all lighting up. There's apparently a big
That's why
fight
before we
that happened
started,
in
I
the
was
White
like
House.
scrolling through my phone and seeing what the prices are doing.
Trump ultimately decided to give negotiations with Iran another chance, despite criticizing J.D. Vance and the envoys for allowing Tehran to delay and stall the process and damage the image of the U.S. and the institutions and the presidency. Trump also spoke to the regional leaders, Netanyahu and the UAE president, support a harder line on Iran. I really disagree with that stance by the UAE. I know they've been attacked a lot by Iran. I don't know. What do you make of the UAE stance and all this? They seem to be very hawkish. They don't want Iran to control the Strait of Hormuz. They've gotten closer with Israel. How vulnerable, or how do you know much about their economy? How resilient or vulnerable is it? I don't know much about it.
Their economies, it's oil and tourism, but it's not right now. It's oil and tourism, but over the last couple of years, they've made a huge push into financial markets and really, becoming a monetary powerhouse. They're trying to remake the city of London for the 21st century. The city of London was, a central monetary hub for a very, very long time through the early years of the Eurodollar system. They set up special rules that allowed banks and financial firms, mostly banks in those days, but financial firms could set up shop in the city of London and have all sorts of special rules, special administrations, special courts, and basically a completely separate regulatory and government regime. The UAE is doing something similar. Which kind of necessarily requires them to be friendlier with the United States and at least the Western powers as a whole. So the UAE is definitely in the thick of getting thicker with the Western economies and marketplaces, and they've been doing that for the last couple of years. So I'm not necessarily surprised because there's always been natural tension, as you know, with Iran, but they really do have some substantial vulnerabilities as they're transforming their economy and their financial connections, because, interrupting the flow of oil here is particularly damaging and particularly dangerous to the UAE and its financial ambitions. Because if they go through a dollar crisis and a dollar shortage, that could potentially damage them structurally over the long run.
What's the swap line they requested from the US? What does it mean? Maybe for the audience that doesn't understand it. And apparently they threatened to trade oil with the yuan. Does that mean anything? Is the swap line really that for them to need? Because swap line means they need access to US dollars. Why would they need that? Because from what I understand, they also have a lot of assets, so it doesn't immediately signal financial difficulties, or does it? Because I've had mixed signals depending who I ask.
Yeah, no, they have lots of reserves, but they don't have nearly enough reserves. And whenever you use reserves, it's like you don't have reserves. So reserves is basically a red herring. Reserves don't matter. I mean, look at India. India has 700 billion in reserves, and the rupee continues to crash because they don't have enough dollars. That's really the issue here. And it goes back to what I just said. The UAE is trying to become a financial hub, which means they have dollars flowing in from all over the world, but those dollars are also flowing out. And it's usually flowing out at different maturities. It's what's called a maturity mismatch. So you have dollars that are flowing in the short run for various reasons. Let's say you've got a lot of oil money coming into the UAE. So UAE has oil companies that produce lots of oil. They sell it in global markets. They got lots of dollars available. And what do those oil companies do with those dollars? Well, they lend them out locally in short-run money markets, which means they constantly roll over these loans. And then the UAE takes this dollar access because it's got lots of dollars floating around Dubai. They takes those dollars and then uses them to invite hedge funds and other financial firms into the country and says, look, I can give you access to cheap funding. Got lots of dollars, short-term rates, short-term money markets. You can do all sorts of hedge funded types of activity with this dollar leverage. However, when you cut off the price of, or you cut oil supplies, that's less dollars coming into the local oil market, which means less dollars available to provide that leverage. But you also have lots of financial flows that have been attracted on top of everything else. And anything that threatens the stability of those money markets locally threatens to lead to a mismatch between dollars that have been lent out at a longer term and dollars that are funded in shorter terms. It's a classic dollar squeeze and crisis that we've seen time and time again. So
it's not that big, that significant of an issue, because people are oversimplifying it like the country's running out of reserves or running out of dollars. It's not as simple. It's like the system has been operating for a while, and there's just been a black swan event happen. The system there's delays in that system, and those delays will be made up through a swap line with the US.
the way you look at it is you've got dollars coming in and dollars going out. If the dollars coming in start to drop too low, then you don't have enough dollars to fund everything that's going out. And suddenly you're in a big problem where it leads to, forced liquidations, which you never want, or maybe even defaults, though that's an extreme case. And so what the dollar swap is to say, look, we got fewer dollars coming in. We still got all these dollars going out. We want to make sure that if we get to a situation where the dollars coming in falls too low, we don't have a massive deficit or even any real substantial deficit that leads us to do all these bad things that we don't really want to do. So the dollar swap is sort of like a break glass in case of emergency kind of a thing. But the fact that they made such a big deal about negotiating with the Treasury Department tells you that they're taking this very seriously, as is the Treasury Department, is like they should. So the UAE is saying, look, we're in pretty tight squeeze here. And it's very, very, there's a good potential, a chance, not maybe the base case, but there is a serious chance that we could get to that situation where our dollar flows lead to some substantial trouble. It's something that they're at least trying to prepare for. So I wouldn't downplay it necessarily, but it's really just about liquidity flows.
I'm just looking at the betting platforms, just skyrocketed. Iran, in the last 6 hours, the odds of President Trump making concessions to Iran regarding sanctions on oil, unfreezing of funds have skyrocketed. Holy shit. It skyrocketed from, to get unfreeze Iranian assets skyrocketed to 30% from like 12% and 17% to 30% on oil sanctions relief. All indicators are pointing towards, and the new proposal has been submitted to Iran. So it seems that Trump has just submitted a proposal to Iran, which included some sanctions relief.
Well, I mean, that would have to be the other side necessarily, right? If you're going to ask Iran to give up, or at least some mechanism for the control of the Strait of Hormuz, then, I mean, that's got to be their other side, right? They got to say, look, give us some money. And again, I can see how that could be a point of contention with Israel, because they're basically implicit in that would be the Iranian regime stays in place, which I don't think the Israelis want. I think the Israelis got into this conflict to change the regime over there.
Yeah, I don't think they could do it without American support, man. I just think.
No question.
I don't know. I'm always hopeful. I'm always the optimist, so I just kind of take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, just
Mario, we don't really know what Trump's true objectives are. I mean, we think we do. It's the big picture terms. It's get rid of the nuclear threat, and then maybe now it's about controlling the Strait. But we don't really know what they would accept for hammering out a deal and walking away. It can't. I mean, the fact that it's gone on this long shows it's not going to be some token gesture on Iran's part to allow them to save face and back. It's got to be something substantial, but it's got to be something substantial on both sides. So, but we don't really know what the various red lines are, and you can't trust any public statements that come out, because time and again we've seen that those public statements are either invalid or just wishful thinking to begin with, which again puts us at a huge disadvantage because we really don't have nearly enough information.
What are the other markets point? Feel free to look at your screen. Anything else interesting other than the price of oil?
Well, everything goes off the price of oil right now. I mean, it's the biggest thing. It's in rates markets. It's in forward rate markets. It's even the stock market. Well, the stock market's been relatively stable itself, but rates are down pretty substantially with oil going down. Nothing terrible or nothing huge, but it's again the market saying something has happened. It's in the direction of lower oil prices, maybe a lower temperature in the Middle East, but nothing that is conclusive. Nothing that says the balance of probabilities have shifted decisively in one direction toward potentially peace. But it's another one of these possibilities. Again, I'm not convinced it's anything substantial or anything real just yet. But markets.
I don't blame you. There's been so many similar events. Let me see the price of Brent crude. I mean, it's not that big of a drop. Let's just not get too excited. It was lower just a few weeks ago. When was it lower? This month. It was at below $100 this month. Now still at $105. So let's not get too excited. This is Trump is conceding.
6% drop is something. It's just not the something. So again, I think that's the skepticism in the marketplace. The marketplace is sharing my skepticisms. Look, we've seen this time and again. Every time the oil price goes up, it's just Trump puts out something, and the markets react, and everybody goes crazy, and then a week goes by, and it's all forgotten about because nothing really has changed.
do you know the Gulf economies well? If I ask you, like, what's the most resilient Gulf economy? And also, how resilient is the Israeli economy? Do you know much about those at all?
I don't know specifically about the Gulf economies. I think probably know best the UAE just because of its dollar connections, but also Saudi Arabia. I mean, Saudi Arabia is not in good shape. They haven't been in good shape for the last couple of years, owing to the production cuts, which have just really cut into everything that Saudi Arabia was trying to do. Saudi Arabia is in big trouble. UAE is potentially in a tough spot. They're not there yet, but they're potentially in a tough spot. And they got to believe that with oil prices and restrictions and before the Iran conflict, oil prices heading lower really put the Gulf states in a bind to begin with, on top of the production cuts and lower quotas from the OPEC members. It was a tough place to be 2025 and 2026 before the Iran thing showed up. Then Iran showed up, and rather than helping them with higher oil prices, they traded higher oil prices for lower sales on the marketplace because they can't move the production that they have. So just from general perspective, the Gulf states are not in good shape. So the fact that some of them are willing to maybe even prolong, extend, possibly participate
that's crazy to
conflict,
me. That's crazy to me. That's crazy to me.
Doesn't that beg the question, what the hell do they know? Right? Because if they're willing to go that, I mean, they're in tough shape to begin with. If they're willing to participate in the conflict, assuming that's the case, we don't know that's the case, but assuming that's the case, what the hell are they looking at on the other side of things? Like I said, there's just a huge blank spot here. And a lot of things don't necessarily add up, at least in the short run. The fact that, Israel went completely, the bad term here, but Israel went completely nuclear over this thing. What were they responding to? And obviously it was enough to convince the U.S. to go along with them, to the point that they threatened the one thing that everybody said you don't attack Iran for, which was, closure of the Strait of Hormuz, energy prices shooting up, possible energy shock, global recession, energy shortages around Asia. What the hell really started this thing? What were they all really responding to? And the fact that the UAE and some of the other Gulf states are still in it at this point, there's got to be something else there.
I think the ball's in Iran's court now to really decide whether to accept it or not. That's the court. That's what I feel like. I think Trump, for him to just start talking only about Cuba, all he's been talking about today is Cuba, trying to distract us away from Iran and going to give us the feeling that Iran is it's been solved. And then for Israel and all the news outlets and Israeli news outlets as well, up in arms, like the world is coming to an end. And obviously looking at the markets, I feel like Trump just gave a massive concession to Iran. That's just my feeling that we're seeing right now. The only question I think what the markets are waiting for, to be honest, is will Iran accept it? I just feel Iranians are being so freaking demanding this time around. I'm like, guys, like, you're asking for it now. You've got a chance to get incredible concessions from Trump, who's desperate to get out of this war. I know you're in a different position to me on this, but I think Iran's requests, if they don't accept this, honestly, we're at a kind of a fork. I feel like we're on a fork. We're either going to end the war, or if Iran doesn't accept this, it's really bad, as in significantly worse than before. Because if Iran's not accepting this, means Trump can't just walk away. You've said this as well. He can't literally just walk. He needs some sort of deal, politically and from a strategic perspective as well.
You're absolutely right, Mario. Trump is a deal maker. He will give concessions. He won't give away the farm, but he will give concessions, and he will give major concessions to get a deal done. It's not a weakness. That's how you go. That's how you negotiate. That's how you operate. That's what every negotiation is. You get something, I get something. I probably get more because I'm in a better position. At least I think I am. But you're right. The Iranians have been, it's almost like they think, again, I think the simple calculation from Iran's side is we just need to keep Hormuz closed and energy prices high enough that it destroys the midterm elections for Trump, and he'll just capitulate to anything and everything to get out before that becomes a major issue there's no walking away from by the time we get to November. And that's, I think that's a miscalculation on their part. I think they're not evaluating the situation, and certainly Trump's resolve to continue the conflict and to continue what I've always maintained is the acceptance of short-run pain for what they see is whatever their goals are, their long-run gain outweigh the short-run pain. I think maybe Iran is miscalculating here, though we don't really know who in Iran is actually making these deals or potentially making these deals. There's definitely hardliners. There's definitely more moderates. Can the moderates sell a deal to the hardliners? If there's a group in the middle, then the Iranians also have to figure, if we do make a deal, in a very weakened state, does it lead to an uprising? We have to secure our own place internally on top of it. Like I said, this is an incredibly complicated situation. It's not so simple as, a couple of people in a negotiating room or, 3 people with Pakistan in the middle. There's a lot of moving parts here. So again, skepticism, I think, is heavily warranted.
Last question is, what about the global economy? If this is the end of it, let's look at it from an optimistic scenario, because last time we talked about like a worst case scenario. If this is over, how long before the economy gets back to what it was in the old days, and how much damage is there?
That's the question. We don't really know that either, but let's assume that there isn't too much damage. It's still going to take a while for the energy markets to normalize. So, I mean, you can still see futures prices drop and say to the 70s, but the 70s are pretty elevated to begin with. And then there's the question of how much damage the economy has already suffered and is likely to suffer in the near term while normalization takes place. Best case scenario, it leads to, we still got to talk about food prices. It leads to, some uncomfortable months where, energy prices are higher, consumer price rates look nasty. Gasoline prices tend to be a little bit stickier. So consumers are going to stuck paying, $4 or $5 gas, really closer to $5 gasoline for the next little while. But by the time summer rolls around, things are looking better. Things are looking more like they're heading in the right direction. Markets normalize. It doesn't necessarily be too bad, though. You got to keep in mind or take into account the fact that the global economy was not in a good place before we started this Iran conflict. So there's likely to be some serious fallout in certain places like Indonesia. India is another one. The Philippines, China is a big one. Chinese economy is in big trouble. The data that just came out from China the last couple of days is just completely ugly. So it might be that for those countries, they might already have passed the point of no return, which would mean a modest downturn at the very least, and maybe that spreads around the world. But optimistically, that's probably the base case on the optimistic side, and then it kind of gets uglier from there if this conflict doesn't get resolved in the near term.
Iran's president just said Iran has consistently honored its commitments and explored every avenue to avert war. All paths remain open from our side. Forcing Iran to surrender through coercion is nothing but an illusion. Mutual respect and diplomacy is far wiser, safer, and more sustainable than war. For me, it's a conciliatory tone, further indicating that it seems Iran is accepting Trump's olive branch. If this all goes to shit for whatever reason, and we'll go down the path, because as I said, we're at a fork where things could get, we're seeing an end to the war, or we could see things get significantly worse, as in uglier than the first few weeks. If this does go down that path and we see the Strait of Hormuz closed for many more months, etc., and destruction of energy infrastructure in the Gulf, how bad is it for the global economy?
Yeah, it's not good. There's no way to put it. There's no way to sugarcoat it. It's just not good. What you're going to see is widespread unemployment. A lot of companies, and we're not talking about large businesses, mostly small and medium-sized businesses all over the world. They've already been struggling to the point they stopped hiring years ago. Some of them have started to lay off workers. And again, that was before we even got to the energy conflict. Higher energy costs just simply push more of them over the edge. Then you don't just have rising unemployment. You also have to keep in mind there's a credit component to this too. We're in a credit cycle that's on the downswing. You add more pressure to the credit cycle, and it potentially spills over into the financial context on top of everything else. There is a seriously bad downside here, which is, I guess if you want to look at it as a silver lining, it would be one thing that is spurring the U.S. and administration toward a conciliatory tone and an olive branch and trying to get this done without going down that road, because the downside, there's a lot of down to the downside.
Fingers crossed. I'll read out two pieces of news. So Turkish President Erdogan held a phone call with Trump covering bilateral to U.S.-Turkish relations, blah, blah, blah. Talking about ceasefire, wanting peace, nothing significant. Saudi put out a statement.
Turkey just went through a massive amount of their dollar reserves. The lira has always been trouble child to begin with. But there's another one experiencing some substantial dollar problems and economic issues to begin with. So of course they're going to be pressuring the U.S. to get this thing done. And
the Saudi put out a statement. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia highly appreciates Trump's decision to give diplomacy a chance to reach an acceptable agreement to end the war, restore the security and freedom of maritime navigation in the Strait of Hormuz to its state prior to February 28th, 2026, and address all points of contention in a way that serves the security and stability of the region. Saudi also highly appreciates the ongoing mediation efforts carried out by Pakistan in this region. In this regard, Saudi looks forward to Iran seizing the opportunity to avoid the dangerous implications of escalation and urgently responding to the efforts to advance the negotiations leading up to comprehensive agreement to achieve lasting peace in the region of the world. That's by Faisal bin Farhan from Saudi. So it seems that,
It sounds
Saudi
like
doesn't want this war. I don't know about UAE and Saudi seem to be in very different positions. We'll see.
Yeah, but it sounds like they're at least taking this seriously. I mean, whether or not it's going to lead to where they want, but at least it sounds like they think this is a serious effort toward peace. So, I mean, that's at least positive.
Yeah, finally. All right, man, that's it. That's all the news we have. Let's see what Iran says to the proposal. And then later we find out, as we're celebrating, 2 hours later, Mujtaba Khamenei was fucking assassinated and all hell breaks loose. I don't know what to believe. All right, man. Well, I appreciate coming on the show. Always enjoy our conversations. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah. See you, Mario.
See you, Jeffrey. All right, guys. We've got Larry Wilkinson coming on the show, Colonel Wilkinson, to discuss the latest developments. There's a lot there. So, yeah, I'm just looking at the latest developments. We'll go through it in a bit, guys. I'll see you live in about 10:15. Bye.